Welcome back. This is the third and final video for Chapter 11. We're going to talk briefly about plural marriage in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then we're going to talk about Scientology, which I'll explain more in a moment. So, finishing up with plural marriage, the reason that polygamy is associated with the Mormons is that it was allowed. It was part of the tradition. But a long time ago, over 100 years ago now, it's been that plural marriage has been outlawed in mainstream forms of Latter-day Saint practice. The issue is that there are still splinter groups, offshoots, small sects within or outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that still observe this. And what makes this a little tricky is that it's often not as simple as just people who have men who have more than one wife. I mean, that's the traditional definition, and nobody really cares too seriously about that unless they're moralizing and trying to tell other people what they need to do and so forth. The part that people usually get troubled by is that those groups, those small fringe groups who practice this, often usually allow for child brides to be part of this. So very young women, often problematically young in terms of mainstream culture at least, involved in these sorts of groups within this tradition. So don't ever mix up the two. There are certainly some fringe groups who read the Book of Mormon and say that they follow Joseph Smith, but mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, mainstream Mormons do not practice polygamy and have not done so for a long, long time. Alright, so now we got about 8 minutes left, and I'm going to talk to you about Scientology. For years, I used to let the students vote on which religion they want me to talk about, and for years, Scientology was always the one. So I've just stopped the voting and started talking about Scientology. Scientology is another American religion. It's associated with a man named L. Ron Hubbard, who lived in the 20th century, and he was best known as a sci-fi writer, a writer of science fiction. But he also wrote a set of self-help books during the 50s, during a time when self-help books were actually pretty popular. And one of these was called Dianetics. And Dianetics was a word that he had made up, and he intended it to mean tools for the soul, basically. Tools for working your soul. And in Dianetics, and in a later book, Scientology, which again is a term he made up, it's just supposed to combine science and theology, Scientology. He explained this idea about our spiritual states, our internal states. And this is what the Church of Scientology is based on. The basic idea is this. Every human being has an invisible, eternal inner self, referred to as a thetan. And a thetan is basically analogous to a soul. It's the same idea. It's something invisible, it's something with you, something that lives on after you die. But it reincarnates. It goes through multiple lifetimes. That kind of idea of a soul. And this carries over throughout the millennia. But as it does so, painful memories attach to this thetan. And these painful memories are referred to as engrams. And engrams are bad. They're bad for you. They are messing up your soul, basically. As they collect, if you want to think of it like gunk and rust and barnacles and corrosion and things like that, they are poisoning and making sick your eternal perfect self. And so what you can do is clean them off. You can try to scrape away the negative memories, the negative impact of this stuff. Now keep in mind, we're talking about reincarnation here. So this is not just things that have collected during your own lifetime. These are the things that have collected over countless lifetimes, tracing way back into history or prehistory or something like that. So how do you do this? Well, one of the initial stages in this is something referred to as auditing. And auditing refers to a process that's basically a combination of like confession, counseling, and biofeedback. You interact with a person. You talk about things that have caused painful memories in your own past. You do this while connected to holding on to what's referred to as an e-meter, which essentially reads biofeedback sort of things, at least in theory. And in doing this, you're supposed to be clearing your thetan, clearing your soul of its burdens. And then this will spin off into more and more sorts of sessions like this and expanding upon this to continue to improve your situation. And the idea is that you are going to feel real benefits from this. This is not just a philosophical sort of thing where you are getting right with some invisible force. The idea is you will be more clear of thought. You'll have better perception. You'll feel better. You'll have a better physical well-being. All these things are going to actually improve in your life. Now, part of the complication about talking about Scientology is that there's a lot of disagreement about whether it's really a religion in the traditional sense of the word. It certainly refers to itself, the mainstream form refers to itself as the Church of Scientology, so that suggests something. There are ceremonies. You could have a Scientology wedding. There are Scientology birth ceremonies. There's Scientology funerals and so forth, and they all have their own particular character to them. But Scientology doesn't worship anything per se, and that's confusing to a lot of people. It doesn't have a central focus. They don't worship L. Ron Hubbard. They don't worship some divine being or God or spiritual force of any sort. And also, there's confusion by a lot of people about why they aren't just a self-help program, something like that. What makes them a religion per se? Because a lot of people see them and say, it seems to just be a business model. And the reason they say that is that in order to progress your thetan, your soul, through these various stages, you do this through basically classes and workshops. And the classes and workshops cost money, and the classes and workshops cost increasing amounts of money, usually, as you proceed. And as you reach these higher and higher levels of operation, which are referred to as OTs, operating thetan. So OT1, OT2, OT3, OT4, and so forth. For a lot of people, that is a problem, because they say, that's not really the way religions seem to have worked. Every religion in the world that has lasted has some sort of process for getting money from its followers. You have to, because the church doesn't exist if you don't pay the people who run it, and you got to get the money from somewhere. So whether it's collections or almsgiving or donations or something, somehow they get money from the people. But they don't usually charge you on a per unit basis, where you show up at church and somebody says, all right, 2 adults and 3 kids, that'll be $45, and then you pay and you go to church and so forth. So that causes a little confusion for people. Another problem is that there are some real ethical questions about this tradition, brought up by people who have been in the tradition and people who have investigated the tradition from the outside, who say that the church, that the organization, does some really underhanded stuff to silence its critics. Now, this is something you have to be very careful with, because it's sexy to make a claim like that, and it's very hard to prove it, and it really becomes a word-of-mouth sort of thing. So maybe they do, maybe they don't. Certainly similar claims have been made about more mainstream religions than this. Also, if we're going to talk about Scientology, we've got to talk about 2 other things. That's aliens and celebrities. A lot of people fixate on the fact that Scientology invokes aliens, extraterrestrial creatures, when you get to some of their creation myths. So where do our thetans come from? Well, our thetans come from aliens who were brought to Earth millions of years ago and killed here. Many of them killed all at once. And their souls, these invisible forces, scattered throughout the Earth. We humans pick them up, and those are what we carry around with us. Now, this sounds very weird from a mainstream point of view, but you got to remember that every religion has really weird stuff that it talks about. It's no more or less weird than the talking snakes you find in Christianity, or the flowers that we talked about blooming on the sides of the dead body in Sikhism and so forth. So every religion's going to have its weird bits. It's just a matter of whether you want to believe them or not. The other thing we have to mention very briefly, we have about 30 seconds here, is the idea of celebrities. A lot of people have problems with the fact that Scientology really focuses on its celebrities. But you have to keep in mind that Scientology is promising real worldly results. It says that if you do this, you're going to get successful. You're going to get important. You're going to get better at life. And so it's in their interest. It makes sense for them to be able to point to people who are rich and famous who do this practice, who are part of Scientology. Because they're saying, you too can be rich and famous. They sure should have somebody they can point to, which is different than other religions who don't claim that. Alright, we're out of time. I will see you in the videos for Chapter 13, the final chapter of this course. Take care.